Let me ask you a question, one that many of us don't stop long enough to ask ourselves when we get involved in toxic relationships, or in this case, in trauma bonds, because they tend to start so fast and so hot, we hardly have time to stop and think about what we're getting ourselves into. Is this what love should feel like? I'm not talking about chemistry. I'm not talking about who texts who back first or who loves who first. I'm talking about the thing that lives underneath all of it. When you hang up the phone with this person you're involved in, and you put your head down at night and you think about where this relationship, this connection, this situationship is heading, how does your body feel thinking about that? I want to talk about that truth underneath all of the small details. Not why am I trauma bonded to this person, not what exactly in my childhood got me to this point. We talk a lot about that on this channel. And I know that if you're here, your ideas of love were not ideal. Neither were mine. I come from a similar kind of mess. But still, you must have had some ideas about what love was supposed to look like. So let's leave all that aside for a moment and talk about what love should actually feel like. What are we supposed to get out of this love thing? Because if what you're calling love is making you sick with anxiety, if you're finding yourself staying up at night worrying about what the other person is doing, about what the other person is saying, not saying, if you're locked in an unending spiral of anxiety and you're just waiting for the next tiny little crumbs of affection or of attention from this person, then you're not involved in love. You're involved in a trauma bond. And I know how hard it is to see it when you're in the middle of it. So in this video, let's just walk together through that one question, because I think it's the one question that has a chance of breaking this spell. And it's one that many of us wish we'd asked ourselves at the beginning of these kinds of relationships or situations, because it could have saved us a lot of time and a lot of emotional pain. Is this how I thought love would feel? I know it sounds really simple, but it's really at the heart of everything that really matters. Wait, did you subscribe yet? I have a lot more to share and I'd love to have you here for it. It really helps my channel grow and I appreciate it so much. Hi, I'm Madalena and this is You Reclaimed. Here we talk a lot about the lasting effects of childhood trauma, of anxiety, of emotional dysregulation, so that we can finally take control and live our lives on our own terms. Think about it. When you were young, before things got complicated and you really started dating, before you got involved in complex romantic relationships, you must have had some ideas of what love looked like, maybe from your parents or from your parents' friends or family friends. And I get that if you're on this channel, your childhood was probably not ideal. Maybe your examples of love were as crappy as mine. I get that. But you must have had some positive ideas, some possibilities that love could present, right? Maybe not just love, but partnership. Two people walking through life in tandem, doing life together. There must have been some purpose for that in your mind. But to ask ourselves this question, I think it can quickly reduce the complexities of a big problem to what really matters at the heart of it, and is actually the whole point of the matter. Did love to you as a child feel like softness? Did it feel like warmth, like the opportunity for two people to do life together, to bring joy to each other, to bring ease to each other's lives? Or was love fraught with difficulty in your mind? Was it a series of arguments or conflicts or displeasures or withholding of feeling and withholding of communication? Did it feel like disconnection and tension? Because I think before we can talk about how we can extricate ourselves, how we can wrestle ourselves out of a trauma bond, because that's what we end up having to do a lot of the time, right? Before we can do all that, we have to ask ourselves the simple question that our younger self already knew the answer to. And we talk a lot about relationships here, about how we relate to other people, our ways of attaching, our patterns in love, the problems and triggers we ourselves bring to our romantic relationships. And we are going to keep talking about that because that's very valuable. I think in this way, we ease our own suffering a bit, right? Learning from each other. But, and it's a very important but, we really can get lost in the weeds sometimes, can we? And we complicate things that really don't need to be complicated because we already know the answers. If you're in a trauma bond, you know that that's the case. Maybe you don't know it consciously, but you can feel it on some level in your body because your nervous system does not feel at ease. And I think we don't have a lot of time to think about how our nervous system feels because most trauma bonds start so hot and heavy with so much chemistry and so much physical attraction that we forget to ask ourselves these basic questions. And we're drowning in longing and confusion all merged together and trying to figure out how to hold on to this elusive connection that doesn't seem to want to be held on to. And that roller coaster ride of dopamine that feels so good and it brings us so much like instant pleasure. It's so addictive and obsessive. No wonder we keep chasing it. It's like a drug that we hate and we can't get enough of. And in the middle of trying to get our next fix of dopamine, we forget to ask ourselves this very basic question. Does this even feel like love? And not just any love, but the kind of love that I imagined when I was young. And I think part of that is that a lot of us are grieving. We're grieving this idealized version of love that we were hoping to find when we grew up, right? And some of those ideas of love, they can be grieved and let go of, right? That perfect Disney love with no problems, no conflicts, where everything flows smoothly and we reach the altar and our dying days in nothing but happiness. Those ideas have to be let go of. But on the opposite end of that, we have the movie love that is part of basically every rom-com you've ever watched, where there's a lot of tension and a lot of attraction and a lot of problems, and we love and hate through it all, and in the end, it works out well. But in real life, that kind of love-hate dynamic is not so much part of it. In fact, healthy, calm relationships are not about love and hate. And I know that these kinds of connections can be so addictive because they're familiar to our nervous system, right? Those of us who come from a childhood of trauma or from emotional neglect, that's what we're looking for. That's what we're expecting in love. And trauma bonds deliver and then some because they trigger us in just the right way. And they confuse our nervous system so badly that by the end of it, we end up feeling that love is pain, that it's all mixed together in the same bucket. And I think the real damage comes when we start to believe that this is what love is. When we reach that point where we find that we have to normalize feeling bad, when we have to normalize not feeling secure, not feeling trust in this connection, when we have to normalize having to chase little scraps of love and affection. I think that does the most damage because it changes our own perceptions of love. And then that soft place we imagined love could be, where love was mutuality, where it was respect and it was two people serving each other and participating equally, not one having power over the other, not one emotionally abusing the other. We start to think that those kinds of ideas were just imaginings of our youth, and we let them go thinking they were foolish in the first place. Anytime I've involved myself in this kind of toxic relationship, I've always reached the same point. And I hope that you reach the same point because it'll prompt you to ask yourself the same questions. And I think that this is the path out every time. Is love this watered down version of affection that I'm accepting? Is this how I want to spend my life's energy and passion involved in something that barely rewards me for my efforts? Here's another question that can pull you out of this loop when you're really stuck. Ask yourself, if this person became my husband or my wife tomorrow, and they remained exactly just as they are right now, if this is how things will always be between us, would that be acceptable for me? Would that be enough? Not if they could change, not if they will see their love for me and behave in a different way, not if they could be something else that I've imagined in my head, but if they stay exactly the same as they are now, would that be okay? Because this is where a lot of us get lost in the fantasy, right? We think that the future idea we have of this relationship can somehow fix the present. We try to do things backwards, right? We project this idealized image of what the relationship could be like if it worked out the way we want it to work out. And we try to bring that backwards to the present moment. But the future isn't some magical escape hatch. It's not going to arrive with the sunrise and make everything better. In fact, unfortunately, it works in the exact opposite way. The future can't reflect its goodness back to the present. It's the present that ends up replicating itself all the way into the future. And this thing that you're living right now, exactly the way it is, that's going to be your future. It's just going to be more of this. So whatever you're living now, imagine putting that on a record and spinning it forever and ever and ever, and then calling that love. And if the present is hurting you, then why would you want more of that in the future? So I think to really reach a conclusion, we have to simplify things, and we have to change the conversation with ourselves altogether. And instead of continuing to ask, how can I change this person? How can I make their behavior into something acceptable to me? Instead, ask yourself, am I okay to accept this? Because it's really up to you. You're the one in control of this. It may not seem like it, but you do have control. You can say no at any time. So ask yourself if you're okay with this being your life. Because a lot of what happens in trauma bonds works only because we don't get into the depths of a real relationship. We hardly ever really get to know each other. These relationships or situations, they start so fast and so hot that most of our interactions have nothing to do with real life. Most of them are love bombing, sex, a few dinners out. They're the highlights, but if that is not mixed into something else, then there's nothing real about it. And if you ask yourself if you're okay with the situation and the answer is no, then pause. I mean, really pause and ask yourself why you're involved in this in the first place and what you seek to get out of it. And give yourself permission to stop trying to prove anything, even to yourself, to your friends, to your family. Stop trying to prove that this is a viable relationship that could be made into something. You don't have to prove anything to anyone. You can actually stop and just choose yourself and your own well-being. You have my blessing and my encouragement to choose just you. And think about it like this. If a young girl came to you, your daughter, your niece, your best friend's daughter, and asked you what love was supposed to feel like, what would you tell her? What advice would you give her to put her on the right track? Would you say that love feels confusing and lonely and hot and cold and all over the place? Or would you tell her that love feels soothing and calm, that it's a safe place where two people come together and lay their heads down at night and trust that the other person has their best interest at heart? Because I'm certain that you wouldn't advise your daughter or any young person that love should feel like something that keeps you in constant emotional pain. Well, here's what. You can tell yourself exactly that same thing. You can treat yourself with the same compassion that you would treat the young version of you. It's not too late for you. Because at the core of it, we know that the love we accept from other people is just a reflection of the love we can give ourselves. And I get that those of us who come from complicated childhoods, we're not used to giving ourselves very much love. I know because I started out that way, and I've spent most of my adult life trying to figure out how to love myself. But if you're tolerating love that is cold and withholding and punishing, then you really have to stop and ask yourself how you're loving yourself, how you're showing up in your own life. Because if you're loving yourself poorly and you're expecting someone else to do your job and to love you, they can't. No one can love you in a way that you actively reject from yourself even, right? Just think about it. If you can't love yourself, how can another person? So you have to start by deciding what you're willing to accept and what is just completely not okay for you anymore. Because if you don't want your story to end in heartbreak, then you can't start relationships that begin with confusion. There is no good ending to things that start that way. There is nothing good that comes at the end of something that starts with you feeling emotionally abused. We don't get involved in trauma bonds or in toxic relationships because there's something wrong with us or because we're incapable of forming healthy relationships. We fall into them because underneath in our unconscious, we're trying to resolve an old story and we're trying to turn something that once felt like pain into something good, into love. But that's not really your job. Your job is to remember what love is supposed to feel like, what love is supposed to bring into your life, and what you can contribute to another person. Because if you're involved in a connection where the other person is not showing up, the other person is not really involved in a conscious way, is not in this shared space that we're supposed to create together as a duo, then you're not even allowed to participate in love. And if you're not given the chance to participate properly, then what's the point? So I think what we need to do, first of all, before anything else, is to stop referring to trauma bonds as love, because they are no such thing, especially when they end up bringing us so much emotional pain. Remember, you're not the only one caught in this loop, and you haven't done anything wrong to get yourself here in the first place. Many of us have been where you are now, and it's not too late for you to get out of it, no matter how difficult the idea seems in the moment. You're allowed to demand a lot more of love, I promise. You just have to remember that love does not feel like crap.